hand it off to Steve Weinstein. He is going to kind of lead this fireside chat. Steve is a great leader within BMNT, director of H4X Labs, and does a ton of amazing programs for early stage startups, folks that are thinking about creating a startup in a variety of programs. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Steve. I'll go on mute and stop my video and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. I'm pleased to be leading this session. Feel free during the session to put any questions you have into the chat, and we'll try to get to them. And Patrick will, I think, be monitoring the chat to make sure that we don't miss any of the questions. I'm pleased to have Craig Dudenhoeffer today, who is currently the Chief Innovation Officer at the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, which was started back in 2014, as well as co-founded the Ocean Solutions Accelerator. So I'm happy to have you, Craig. Thanks for joining us. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. And Steve, it's wonderful to have you leading this fireside chat today. Also, just a shout out to the event organizers. How incredible that, we have an entire day focused on the blue economy. 3 years ago, when we kind of kicked things off at Sustainable Ocean Alliance here in the Silicon Valley, that wasn't something that was happening. So I feel like that's progress in and of itself. As Steve was mentioning, Sustainable Ocean Alliance is the organization. It's a 501c3 nonprofit in San Francisco. And the primary purpose of it is to generate solutions for the ocean's greatest challenges. And we also take, a deep focus in supporting leaders from around the world, many of them young leaders, and help them find their pathway into this kind of work. I primarily work, as Steve mentioned, on the Ocean Solutions Accelerator program, which is what you might expect from an accelerator. If you've heard of the Y Combinators and the 500 startups and the other ones out there, except the main difference with ours is we only work with entrepreneurs that are building for-profit solutions, which are market-driven, and are also going to have a massive positive impact on the ocean's health as they scale. So that's really the big difference with what we're working on.
That's great. I mean, so one of the things that makes me think of is when you first started the accelerator, how many applications did you get?
I think year one, it was something like 100 applications.
And now how many are you getting?
Oh, multiple hundreds each time we host a program. We've definitely seen an increase in the number of applications that we have, which is great. From our own perspective, that startups are finding us, but it also is an indicator that first of all, there's a real passion that people have for building startup companies that are having a positive impact, and people are starting to understand the opportunities that come with these massive challenges. These challenges are facing industries. These industries are facing challenges as well, not just the environment. Whether that's like shipping, right? And how do you decrease shipping emissions, right? New policies putting in place like banning plastics in countries or states in the US. And in order to meet some of those regulations and allow businesses to continue doing what they do, there needs to be a supply of new innovation that meets those standards and has a positive impact rather than exploiting the ocean's resources or causing damage to the habitats.
So when you're thinking about this whole new environment with the new administration in the United States and the regulatory issues that come up, it's still really hard for these startups, right? It's right. To get funding. I read somewhere recently that of all the hundreds of billions going into startups, less than 4 billion is going, including NGOs, into your kind of startups, ocean sustainability startups. Where are the areas you really think that somebody can make a difference? Like you can come with a startup and you can get funding all the way through. Which areas?
Look, I would say look to the markets, right? Look to the markets that are connected to those industries, and so I mentioned shipping already. I don't currently see enough solutions in the shipping place or space. And I think there's innovation out there, but a lot of these industries are still going through their digitization. And I think that's ripe for disruption, to use a Silicon Valley buzzword. But there's opportunities there. I mean, 90% of all goods, last time I checked, are still spend time on a container ship. So that's a huge market opportunity as new regulations get put in place. New materials is also a huge area, right? Packaging, these large CPG brands that want to start responding to their customers who want the brand to align with their values. And, new generations that are coming up are asking, for products that aren't damaging the ocean. So you look at new materials from startups, like Lollyware, a startup from our program, or Cruise Foam, which are taking chitin or seaweed and are turning it into a packaging product that replaces polystyrene or plastic used for single-use disposables, and creating this huge opportunity. Fisheries, aquaculture, there's huge sustainability hurdles to overcome there, and I think that those are all places to look. And then going into it too, like looking at ocean data, there's all kinds of stats about the 95% of the ocean that's unexplored, and how important ocean data is going to be. I mean, that is an enabling technology as far as I'm looking at it. Without understanding our oceans, how do we truly measure the impact we're having, and also the positive impact that we can have?
I definitely, it's exciting. I mean, sustainable seafood and other areas are, happening. You're seeing, everybody just taking a new mindset. But if I'm an entrepreneur, or the entrepreneurs who are coming into your program or programs like yours, where are they coming from? Where did they get the bug? Are they coming out of academic research, or are they coming from elsewhere, where they just are, part of some foundational funding that they got and advanced research, coming out of Embari or, Monterey Bay, or where are they coming from?
Yeah, I would say, just speaking generally, we're getting a lot of scientists, people who are coming from the realm of academia or taking their PhD work and wanting to spin it out and actually have it enter, leave the lab and enter the real world. And so that's really exciting. And I think, working with scientists as well that are becoming entrepreneurs, I'm always blown away. A lot of the qualities that make someone a good researcher, studying something, being extremely passionate about it, also are good qualities to see in an entrepreneur. I mean, you're testing hypotheses here. The one thing I would flip on its end is typically science and researchers tend to be risk averse, and that does kind of conflict with what an entrepreneur kind of has to do to stick their neck out and go out there. But I'm also seeing a lot of professionals at large corporations that have seen a way in which products are built and they demand something better. And they've either tried to do skunkworks innovation projects, within their teams that have been shut down or not fully embraced, that are saying, well, if I can't do this at this large corporation that I'm working at, then I think I can go do this myself. And that's another place we see a lot of entrepreneurs coming from. But I love when I meet entrepreneurs that have their product and their startup grounded in science. That's the kind of credibility that I'm really looking for. And maybe that comes from a little bit of a bias. I studied ecology and evolutionary biology, and I've made my way into the Silicon Valley tech sector. But I think that there should be more opportunities and more programs like Hacking for Oceans, Steve, that ask young brilliant people at universities, to work on developing some solutions for some of the world's most critical challenges.
Thank you for that. Talking about Hacking for Oceans, because there was a question in the chat about, is there, is entrepreneurial spirit hitting colleges? And are there classes that, and I've been lucky, and Craig has helped out on, of creating a class called Hacking for Environment Oceans, of which we launched at 2 universities, and hopefully to have 3 or 4 more universities doing that. We're trying to match, entrepreneurs and scientists, because one of the problems, as Craig points out, is that the scientists still, ocean science still tends to, people gravitated to learn more and to study rather than to make change, right? And so how do you think the world is changing in the sense that people are willing to take risks, to solve some of the ocean's problems rather than, stand back and get 100% sure that it will work? Are you seeing a little bit more of that entrepreneurial spirit of throwing the spaghetti against the wall? Or are you still seeing the, I need to learn more before I test it out?
I would like to see more of it. I would like to see more people taking risks and, again, taking that leap of faith into entrepreneurship. And I think in order to do so, we really need universities to think about how entrepreneurship is not just taught to programmers, right, or computer science students, but also to ecologists, right? It's definitely not happening enough, and that cross-pollination is key, right? You can't solve the ocean's challenges ignoring science, and you also can't solve the challenges, especially through entrepreneurship, with not having someone to represent, technology and innovation. And then you need, a business-minded person to figure out, okay, like, we want to have this impact. We can use this technology, but what is the business model? How do we actually make sure that what we're talking about, someone actually wants to buy, right? There's a customer and a large enough market to scale this solution and then actually realize the impact that you want to have for the ocean. And that only happens, I think, when you have that kind of cross-pollination happening. And I'd like to see more of it happening at universities, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's why I've been, pushing the Hacking for Oceans. So definitely, because I come out of the lean startup movement, and just getting that entrepreneurial spirit into impact and mission-driven kind of entrepreneurship is what you're focused on. And I think there at least been a mindset change. If you can get students when they're younger, maybe they'll dedicate their career of doing it. I'm in Palo Alto, and unfortunately, lots of students divert themselves off to the traditional Google, Amazon's, Facebook, Netflix, and hopefully we're stealing some of them into the sustainability space and the ocean space. It brings up a question that, are you seeing that the, principally a ton of the money that came from, the traditional foundations, which has been the bedrock of support for a lot of oceans work, have you seen a change in their mindset to being willing to give money off to startups that are a little more risky and less, rather than, I think there's a stat that over 50% of the money goes to traditional, kind of research institutions. Are you seeing them diverting more funds?
I think that, again, more could be done. I think that you have large NGOs that have, some of them continue to do kind of business as usual, and some of them are locked into long contracts, government contracts. And I would like to see, either the NGOs starting to take some risks and look at, ways of seeing much larger impact and trying to get more impact returns from the work that they're doing than the usual avenues that they're going with, or to see that funding made more available to, the ocean moonshots. These ideas that really do have the possibility to scale. And I think there's this kind of stigma, I think, in the ocean space. Anytime you're talking about doing good for the environment, that somehow it's like you should volunteer for it, right? There's no money in it, right? Those kind of things. And I just don't think that that's true. I think that there's the ocean's health and its decline is really going to negatively impact many different industries, entire economies. And it's about time we start looking at how we do things more in harmony. with the ocean and with the environment that we have. But I would like to see more funding going into, earlier stage solutions, right, from entrepreneurs.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a key. That's something that needs to happen in order for us to think that we can solve these insurmountable problems in our lifetime.
But a lot of them require government help, right? I mean, in order, like if you want to do a marine protected area or some of these things that, are good for the environment, but not necessarily good for business other than, second order. Where would you, if somebody gave you a ton of money, where do you think you would be investing first? Like you start up the Craig's investment fund, right? And you became the SoftBank of the oceans.
So first of all, I'll note that I think that there are different problems that can be solved better from entrepreneurship than from donations and nonprofits. Right. And then there are the exact opposite, right? So we do see that there are some startups that are approaching things like coral reef rehabilitation, and they're tapping into markets, like coastal tourism, right? And I think that there are ways in which that can be monetized, and then there are other things like marine protected areas, which are going to require policy and regulatory, additions in order to really preserve that ecosystem. I think it's about investing in looking at running it like a venture capitalist, right? Working with the markets, working with capitalism, and investing into solutions that will be sustainable themselves at scale, right? Not as much, the nonprofits that are going to have to keep asking for someone else to continue supporting them in order to really reach the impact that they're looking for. It's why do we still expect to give $1 million to an organization and ask for them to show us $1 million worth of impact on the ocean? We should be investing it and trying to have that 1 million kick back out $10 million worth of impact returns, or $100 million worth of impact. That's the situation we're in, right? I mean, the current state of things isn't working, or we wouldn't be where we are. And so it needs new, innovative, capital coming in that's less risk averse in order to jumpstart some of these amazing startup companies. And they're out there. They're definitely out there. So
there've been some, there's, AIM partners, right, who are, a pure investment into kind of what I'll call this sector. There's some others, foundational type stuff like Ocean's Kind and some of these others, right? What do you think what do we need for the big guys to come in? The Sequoias and some of these others thinking that this is a worthy thing. Do you think it's just going to be proof points that we're just going to need a few exits? Or is it really just a couple of years, or is there a way to get them in earlier?
Well, hopefully it's not in a couple of years, because the timeline's not looking great for the kind of impact we need to start having. There are some amazing investors that are jumping straight in and leading rounds in these companies and within startups in these industries. When you talk about fisheries and aquaculture again, sustainable packaging.
Right, but what's going to make them more people show up?
Well,
right? What's going to make it?
Without a doubt, I mean, an ocean unicorn, or I would rather call it a narwhal, but it'd be great to see. Those. And I do think that there's some awesome companies that have trajectory to really put ocean innovation and investment on the map. And so that will take time. But it's also about, I think it's about more traditional VCs looking at it from a market opportunity, right? VCs don't tend to put investment dollars into things that they don't fully understand, right? And so there aren't a lot of investors that I think have really looked at, fisheries and aquaculture yet. As far as like high tech Silicon Valley type VCs, it's just not as well, the information's just not out there. It's not in your face. Same
So
with
you
shift.
think it's an awareness. It's just an awareness. There is a little bit of awareness that there's the potential here.
I think it's awareness.
We need a better marketing campaign. Not that we're going to hell in a handbasket. We need we have solutions just sitting in the laboratories around the world that need money.
Exactly. And that's the point. And I think that we need some of that FOMO, right? We need some of that. Oh, why didn't I put my funding into this company?
Okay.
Right.
Right.
It was right there. It was in the Silicon Valley. It's down the street, and I didn't think about it because.
So, do you want to give a couple of plug for a couple of your companies that you think people should be just getting excited about?
I'd love to. I think a company like Finless Foods doing cell-based tuna, right, is incredible, right? I mean, that's an innovative idea. Do we think that that's possible, that company becomes a unicorn? I mean, look at other cell-based meats, right? Yeah. What's more likely if you look at an Impossible Foods or a Memphis Meats, or a company doing cell-based beef? If that company is making it, is it more likely that that's going to happen in the future for seafood or not going to happen? Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's kind of a no-brainer.
Finless Foods, another one you want to plug?
Yeah. I think a company like Cruise Foam is incredible. I mean, that's Santa Cruz company not too far away from here in the Silicon Valley, turning chitin, very common, substance out in the environment into polystyrene replacement or alternatives.
Is it recyclable?
It's completely compostable, and it's also got great, it's great as an insulator, and it's great as product that can actually, be used as packaging more in the mainstream. And what I love to see is when these startup companies that have been working with us, that we see as these great ocean impact companies, start to receive money from mainstream Silicon Valley type VCs that they're only interested in profits. I love to see that mix on the cap table, because that means that this company has figured it out, right? We're not just relying on telling people like, this is better for the environment, so people are going to make better decisions and change their behaviors. I don't want to place an investment in a company based on human behavior change, right, as being the sole thing that's going to switch this. I want it to be better. I want it to be cheaper. And I want it to be good for the environment, right? And I want it to be, something that has legs as a business. I think that's just so important to think about. So many entrepreneurs I talk to come in with this idea that they produce something better than the environment, and it's the same. It's a replacement to something that isn't good for the environment. Big corporations don't want to, change the way they manufacture. They want something that you can plug into what they're already doing and makes economic sense.
Right. It has to have real value to take the risk. Exactly.
Unless you have a policy coming in place that's going to force people to make a change, you need to be competing as a business with these other businesses, not mixing the story too much, and expecting people to go with you because you're having a positive impact. Unfortunately, it's not how I've seen capitalism working. But there are plenty of opportunities where you can align startups and corporations with a product that's doing good and is a good business decision. And we should be looking at that.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go to a couple of questions in the chat. So one question is hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I think I have a good idea, but I don't know how to get started. How do I get the initial seed funding to even just, do I go to friends and family in a traditional model, or are there other alternative ways to get a little bit of money to kickstart my idea?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of grants. That's the one good thing, right? You could say, hey, we need more investment in this space from, mainstream investors. But there are also, because this is something that is doing good, there's a lot of grants out there that you can apply for. I mean, depending on the impact that you're having. I would, if I were a startup, put together a good, board of mentors for you. That's one of the best ways. Talk to ocean scientists, make sure that the impact that you're having is positive. And then don't over prototype what you're working on. I mean, this is a classic mistake that entrepreneurs do. A cardboard cutout, a looks like example is great to go out there and start trying to attract some investment.
So is there, for grants, what would be like three, the one in the question is, sustainable seafood type of fisheries, where would they go for money? Like, where would you say for initial grants?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different places you can go for money. I do see a lot of startups in this space getting NSF grants for their work. I also think that there's plenty of foundations out there that before you've really decided whether you're taking a for-profit or a non-profit approach, and you're still developing and doing research on the product or innovation, that you can still access. But yeah, I think the spaces that you mentioned, again, these are oftentimes, you've got to find philanthropists that believe in you early on. But friends and family, I mean, you can treat it like a normal startup. I think there's just other opportunities that you do have, because what I've seen working in the space, more than broader tech, which is what I worked in before starting the Ocean Solutions Accelerator, is that the people will really gravitate towards what you're working on, and don't underestimate that. I mean, we have mentors for our program. We have about 180 mentors, and they work at large, successful, corporations and nonprofits. And what never ceases to amaze me is, the fact that they will give you their time because they have this passion for the ocean, and you very quickly as an entrepreneur, you'll be the most interesting meeting they have all week, right? Because you're allowing them to do something to give back to a thing that they're very passionate about. And they haven't been able to use that skill set before. They haven't been able to apply their knowledge of marketing or their understanding of sales or fundraising. They haven't been able to apply that to ocean work before. And they're deeply passionate about having an impact. And so don't underestimate that angle too. I mean, people really want to work on things that they care deeply about. And I think also the best talent out there is going to be more choosy in the line of work that they're doing. They're going to want to also join a company, mentor, invest in, something they care deeply about.
I mean, I think you make a good point. Every entrepreneur needs to have a cadre of people around them who are smarter than them. And these are advisors and mentors. And don't be afraid, particularly in this space, to find those people, because people are willing to give back, right? Yeah. I mean, we find in the Hacking for Oceans class, people just volunteering who, just wanting to give back and see if they can take their skills.
Absolutely. And I would just like, just also, I feel like I have to kind of, say, hey, if you want to get involved and create an ocean startup, I wouldn't be doing my job if I said, don't, email me at SOA, right? And that's what we're doing. We're working with young people or people with new ideas or people who are restarting their careers and are applying that to ocean health. So there is a network out there. We've built a pretty good one ourselves, and we'd love to see how we can work with you and how we can help you in the early stages. All right, there's my plug.
Okay, that's a good one. I plugged Hacking for Oceans. So are you seeing a change in regulation and environmental protections to allow startups to, kind of test, things out?
Yes and no. I think that like new regulations and new policies, I mean, they're going to do like one of two things. They're either going to stifle innovation in the sector or they're going to enable it. And then there are also like current policies out there that people don't really think about that prevent, work that's being done to try to save endangered species, like coral. CITES is great for preventing trafficking of organisms. But is it also inhibiting the ability for a startup that wants to work with, planting coral or how much red tape or hurdles does a company have to go through before it can start doing that research? And then the flip side of that is like what I would mention about plastic bag bans. I mean, unfortunately, there's also states that are banning bans on plastic bags at the same time. But ultimately, like that kind of opportunity, that policy, I mean, talk to the startups that we've worked with that are building alternatives for plastics. They'll tell you that they're writing those policies. You know, where are they bringing their innovations? To the states, to the cities, to the countries that, have banned plastics, because there's a clear market opportunity that's been created. So we definitely, I mean, you can't talk about innovation in any field without talking about policy. But I do, I'll beat the drum. More needs to be done. And that's where I think awareness and, communities, rising up and, talking about what they want, what they expect, electing people who also will push forward those values. It all adds up to the solutions that then end up getting built. But you have to have the market opportunities created.
Right, but do you see the environmental protections that continue to get in the way of, I've seen some like regional places, be open to testing some new tech. Are you seeing in the environmental protections that anywhere in the United States you're seeing? I saw some in San Diego Harbor and some other places where they're allowing you to do some what I'll call environmentally questionable testing, in the sense of not fitting the letter of the law. Are you seeing other places?
There are places, but they still are few and far between. We work with a lot of founders that want to put their tech in the water, right? And are ready to do it, and they're still struggling to find the right test sites where they're able to do so. There are some like government test sites as well that people can use, and then around the world, we're working actively to figure out where these places are, where are these labs where you can get your technology wet, put it in the ocean and do a pilot run, or understand how it's really working in the marine environment, which is a whole nother challenge. That anytime you're putting something in the ocean, it's a lot. It's hard. I mean, talk about putting things into space. The ocean is so much more unforgiving than space.
Right. I mean, I think it seems so counterintuitive, right? Because you can walk in the, just go into the ocean.
Communication is harder.
Right. If anybody ever figures out how to do high-speed communications under the oceans, I mean, that's a startup. That could,
for sure.
I mean, that's one where you can do real high-speed video level communication.
You got to believe there's markets for that too.
Yeah. There's a question on what about those startups that are doing like coastal restoration in like, seagrass, microplastics, or where they're, basically improving the coast. Have you seen a few that have been able to be venture backed?
Yeah. So I would, I don't think I could respond without mentioning Coral Vita, which is, planting corals. They're located in the Bahamas. Sam and Gator and their team over there is doing incredible work. And, you wouldn't normally think like, hey, you could run a for-profit company that plants corals. Who's going to pay for that? But then you look at how reefs mitigate against storm surge during hurricanes. A healthy reef is a natural barrier out there. And so you also got to look at the contributions that the reef has, when it comes to coastal tourism. Do you want to go to a hotel and go see a dead bleached reef, or do you want to go to one that has a vibrant reef? And so looking at creative ways like insurance playing a role in insuring reefs is super important. And then also mentioning Seawater Solutions in our current cohort, which is going on right now. They're looking at how you change, coastal habitats that have perhaps been used for agriculture in the past in irresponsible ways and has destroyed ecosystems, and how you actually rehabilitate it and also build salt tolerant farms that create habitat in marshland for creatures. So that's definitely happening. And there's, you have to get really creative as an entrepreneur to find the for-profit business model that works for some of these. But time to get creative. That's what being an entrepreneur is all about, right? If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Right. No, it seems like, no, I mean, I do think that there are some, as you said, creative business models that are coming into the fore that allow people. And I do think, taking advantage of a little regulatory pressure sometimes helps, right? Is modifying them to be more entrepreneurial, those regulations, to allow experimentation and as well as pushing, entrepreneurs in the direction of, helping them get the funding for that is key. I still think personally, we need a few more successes on the board. That will drive more money. Because
SOA's working on it, Steve. We're working on it.
I know you're working on it. A lot of people are. And I think, how do you think I know you said this earlier, but how do you get the traditional foundations to want the 10X at the other end? What do you think has to change?
I do think that examples is a good way to do it. And, showing that traction that you have, now that we've had SOA cohorts, we're on our fourth now. We'll be working on our fifth before the end of the year, representing nearly 50 startup companies in the ocean space that are having positive impact. And it helps when you can point to a company and go, they just closed their Series A, right? Valued at $30 million. They just closed their Series A valued at $19 million. Across the cohort, we've seen more than $1 million raised post-program on average from our companies so far. And as they start entering those larger rounds, it's going to skyrocket from there. So that really helps. But then the other thing that I think is really missing, and I'm glad that it came to my mind, is measuring impact, right? Measuring impact is so important. And guess what? Investors investing in startup companies, they're really good at measuring their returns. They're really good at it. They're really good at their financial projections for returns. You know what they're really bad at? Measuring impact, adding up the impact of their cohort, their portfolio, and reporting on it in a way that makes sense. So that's something at SOA we're really working on as well.
So are you like in green buildings, there's like the LEED standards of measure, to prove that your building is, healthy. Are you coming up with some new, impact metrics, because environmental impact has been, studied for, forever. Or do you think there's some real new opportunity to kind of come up with the equivalent of a seal of approval for impact, basically? Yeah. And
100%. 100%. So you look at areas that are really well studied with a lot of white papers on from an impact perspective, and you've got common units of measure that you use, like CO2 EQ, right? CO2 or equivalent. Looking at GHGs and how do you compare it all and understand what's a better pathway to having impact. And then you go to other industries like packaging and plastics. Guess what? Not all plastics are created equal. Not all plastics are, as bad for the environment as others, right? And so, how do you start comparing a straw in the ocean to a skateboard or something like that, right? How is it really just kilograms of plastic? So you got to create, a common denominator, a unit of measure to look at how to compare the impact that a startup is having. And that's just one side of things. Then look at aquaculture and fisheries. How do you measure impact in that space? How do you measure the fish you didn't catch because of this new technology? The bycatch you didn't catch.
The bycatch.
How do you measure that, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to measure against something. So there's a lot of work to be done on that. And, we're working with UCSC, UCSB, scientific minds there to better understand, what's the best credible way of comparing impact? And then how do you take it the next step further? What's the value?
And how do you make it green? How do you make it digestible by, the public in a way that they'll make decisions based on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, across SOA, we have over 100 different solutions that exist within the community, some nonprofit, some for-profit, some grassroots. And we're going to add all of that impact together. And, we've got this isn't hypothetical. This is something that we're going to be working on that needs to be done. And,
so when should we look at the first output? When do you think?
Yeah.
go a little more public with it.
Yeah, definitely by the end of the year. Yeah, definitely by the end of the year, and then so into next year,
we should be looking for.
We'll be able to train others. Yeah,
okay. We're going to have the Energy Star rating for impact. So one of the questions that came in is, where is the line, of oceans and land? Is that an artificial line that people have? Like, if I'm doing, and the question is, energy generation, we're harvesting energy out of the ocean, bringing it to land, or, sustainable seafood, that's, or cellular bio or whatever, where's the line? Where's this ocean line?
It's a great question. And I think like when we first set out, right, Daniela and myself, when we first set out to start SOA's accelerator program, that was a question we asked ourselves. What startups would we accept into an oceans accelerator based on their impact, and what startups wouldn't we? And we found really quickly that line is extremely blurry, right? What we did notice, though, is that the oceans challenges tend to, be something that people push back. Everyone's focused on land issues. You look at corporations, look at their CSR campaigns. Like, they're all about land-based problems, CO2 broadly, but most of them, dare I say, like don't talk about oceans. How can you not talk about something that covers over 70% of the planet? That's a pretty important ecosystem, feeds billions of people. It's so important and just so underrepresented. So we define it, based on, the cohorts we've seen, the startups we've accepted. You have to be able to measure a positive impact on the ocean, right? So like I said, there's some companies we work with that will never be deployed into the ocean, right? But without a doubt have an impact on the ocean, or prevent something that's happening from happening further on the ocean. And so I think the line is blurry, and I think that that's okay. I think as humans, maybe as scientists too, like, we want to work off of a taxonomy. We want to label everything. But I think if you can trace that impact down to the ocean, I don't think anyone is going to balk at you at saying you're a blue startup, right? But yeah, look, packaging, like, that's something that happens on land. People could say it's a land-based problem. It's also a huge ocean problem, without a doubt.
I totally get the land, because people on the land are going to use it too, right? I mean, the majority of the users, your customers, are going to be on the land. But I think you mentioned to me once that when you think of money going to ocean startups or philanthropy going to the oceans, it's incredible, a small number. I don't know if you know some of those numbers. But.
Yeah, I think it's like 1% of all philanthropy goes towards ocean issues. So if we think that philanthropy alone is going to solve these giant challenges, then we're lying to ourselves. We are going to need to rely on different streams of capital. And that's why, what I really want to talk about today is the role of entrepreneurship and building solutions in markets where those solutions can scale is so important. Every, $1 million that goes into a ocean impact for-profit startup company that can measure its impact is $1 million that, wouldn't be in that space doing that work otherwise. And so we need to drive more capital. I don't remember the exact, projections. Someone has put it together, what it would cost us to reverse these problems. And it's a big number. But at the same time,
it's definitely more than 1% of philanthropy, and $4 billion of venture, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah, without a doubt. But this is a relatively unexplored avenue for funding work that's having a positive impact. So I just think it's so important to highlight the opportunities. Anytime you have a huge problem, right? There are huge opportunities. And if there's a business model, why not do a win-win or a win-win-win, right? And it's not about, hey, we shouldn't be doing donations. We should be doing that. Raising awareness, planting mangroves, cleaning up beaches, that's all good. Like, this isn't a competition, but we should also be looking at other ways we can have positive impact by working with markets and working with some of the companies out there that have arguably put us in this position. I mean, whether you want to blame the consumer or blame the corporation, those contributors to the problem, they have such a big role to play in how to create a better future. If you can convince a very large corporation that's producing plastic bottles, if you can convince them to switch, you should be working with them, right? You're going to be bigger than that company before you start doing good? No, you should be working with them and figuring out how to do it in a way and make sure that it's not blue washing or greenwashing, but that there's legitimate backing within the company to make a change that's systemic through the company.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways, embarrassment sometimes works well.
Yeah. Well. And there's a lot of that happens too, for sure.
Right. I mean, are you seeing any changes in the tech landscape that you think, why aren't people taking this tech or versions of this tech and moving it over to the oceans, right?
Yeah.
Or have you seen like underappreciated new tech that you don't understand why it's not making it over into ocean startups?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is not in a mainstream way, but originally, like I said before, like I was a biologist before this. At least that's what I studied. Maybe almost a biologist. And I saw how tech was being taken, and used for studying animals and in their environments. Things like what we put in our wearables and our fitness trackers today, how that's being adopted and to use this for science, or drones, how drones are being used. And I think that the really creative people are doing that. But yeah, a lot of the new Internet of Things and IoT devices that are coming out, things that are high accuracy sensors. We should be looking at ways we can put those on to the autonomous vessels, like Sea Proven over in France or Saildrone here. How do we start, collecting more data on the oceans? Yeah, without a doubt. Like, I can't remember who said this either, but, it was said that, like, hey, we could just stop innovating and we'd have a lot of business we could still do with the existing ideas and the IP that's floating around, right? If we just put our heads together, think up some new innovations, some new ideas. And I love it when you see, new technologies being adopted into, different markets, and especially when they can have a positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I see a lot of and I think to something you said earlier, if we can get more people involved who are not just studying ocean health or ocean science, it will just naturally bleed over there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had one other question in terms of, are you seeing that we're making progress anywhere? Like if you take the step back to the impact lens that you talked about, are we making any progress?
Yeah. So from the angle of entrepreneurship specifically?
Yeah, from entrepreneurs creating companies, but are they having any, if you take the global sum of them all, are you seeing any change in the top 10 ocean issues, right?
I think in a lot of ways it's still yet to be determined, because this. I mean, yep. You invest money into a nonprofit that's going to go out and have impact today, right? And they'll tell you what they did by the end of the day, right? They can tell you how many trees and calculate it out and what the impact was. Investing in ocean startups, you're banking on the fact that when they make it to market and they scale in market, then that's when you're going to see the returns, like 5 years or greater from now, the really substantial returns. So I think that that's still something that, without a doubt, I mean, you can look at the way these products work and the LOIs they have with large corporations to use this instead of what they typically do, which is harmful to the ocean. Without a doubt, they're having an impact. But I think it will take time to see the returns of that impact.
So if you put your crystal ball on, if you put your crystal ball and you're seeing the future, 5 years and 10 years, where do you think the biggest impact will be happen? So will it be on, sustainable food? Will it be on pollution? Will it be, where do you think, the startups that will have the biggest, it's 5 and 10 years, are we sitting here in this saying, I wish more money went in there. I wish we had some way of impacting. Or in 5 years, are we celebrating successes, not just economic successes for the startups, but remember that impact is it's dual use, as they say, right? Or one is to make profit and to fuel it, but the end is to actually make the planet better, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm an optimist when it comes to this, and this happens a lot when I see a startup application and I talk to the founders. I think in my head, like, the future that I believe can and should exist, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, does this.
So 5 years from now, what would you like the impact to be? And therefore, then people on this call could go make a startup that maybe will have an impact because you're seeing the future. I would like single-use plastics to be a thing of the past. Why do we today still use something that for a minute that then spends an eternity on Earth in a landfill or in the ocean? That just shouldn't exist. If you designed that intelligently from the beginning, you wouldn't choose that. It's just irresponsible. I don't think that. I think that that's going to be something that we solve. Sustainable protein. We can't continue to spend the amount of energy we do on feeding people. We need to come up with new ways to do that and ways that don't destroy the environments that we have. The earth will be fine without us if we can't seem to take care of it. It will find a way. We'll be the ones who struggle. I think that there'll be a lot more sensors and a lot more known about the ocean, because I think that, we're starting to deploy sensors and smart buoys and all kinds of drones that will tell us about the ocean. And we'll probably learn a lot more about things we could do to improve the ocean's health. I think that those are some key areas that I would be looking at if I was an entrepreneur that's building solutions. And guess what? Like, those things have to exist. We believe we're going to live in a world where we can still feed people, right? If we believe we live in a world where we haven't completely collapsed our organisms. And then I'd also like to just see fishing and aquaculture. Fishing, yes, making strides towards becoming more sustainable. And then also for aquaculture, let's not chart a new path where we're finding another way to exploit the ocean and fish down food chains in order to feed, our farm fish. That needs to change as well. And great. And you think in terms of regulatory, if you were sitting there up in, either in the world stage or at least in the United States stage, what would you want them to do in Congress to kind of foster this environment, right? I mean, they have some power, right? So what would you like them to do?
I would like to see more regulatory pressure, definitely on plastics. That should be more of a low hanging fruit. But I'd also like to see a lot more emphasis put on government funding for research and development of solutions, right? I think that's key. And I think that, like, given the political climate that we're in, that should be something that starts to be more realized. Like I said earlier, there's a tie between, policy and innovation, and right. It would be great to have the scientists and the policymakers communicating, and then that will make space for innovators to come up and jump into those markets where those opportunities are created and build sustainable solutions.
No, that's great. And now I'm going to bring it back all the way back to SOA for a second. I have a startup. What's going to make me get accepted into, what do you really, behind the curtain a little bit, what really gets your team excited when they see an application?
Diversity of thought, the teams. We like to see, if you look at our latest startup, or our latest cohort rather, We have 7 different ocean impact startups from 7 different countries. So that's something we know. The ocean solutions aren't just going to be solved by people living in the Silicon Valley. The ocean's problems are vast, so we like to see diversity. The team, just focusing on that a little bit more is so important. Ask any investor that you talk to. They want to believe that this is the team that works well together and has the skills to take it to market. Impact, without a doubt. Like, I don't want to have a conversation with a startup or see in the application that they haven't thought about their impact. I think that's the core of what we're trying to do here, right? So that's really important. And you don't have to have all of the answers here. We know that you're an early stage company typically, but we definitely want to see that you've thought about it and you have ideas of how to measure and report on the impact that you're having and why it matters. And then look for the market opportunity. We want to make sure the business model and the product, you've got, product market fit, who your customer is, all the typical stuff that you would a VC might expect, you to have as a business. Those are all things that I want to see. And then we're building a community at SOA. So coachability is super important, right? How you interact with others is super important. The fact that you can admit, hey, I don't know something, I need help. Like, don't be afraid to ask. That's literally why we're here. It's to figure out what you need and how we can get it to you. Those are all things that I think goes beyond what you can see in an application. But, we want to work with people who are passionate about, the oceans, and we want to work with people that want to make this their life's work.
So that's great. I think we're almost out of time here. The hour flew by. I want to put a plug in for Hacking for Oceans. Anybody who's interested at their universities or anything, reach out to me. Reach out to Craig for anything oceans related, as well as SOA. If you're an entrepreneur, the one thing, this is a small club. It's an amazingly small club of entrepreneurs, but luckily it's worldwide and it's growing. And if you're not part of it, please reach out and we'll kind of help you join. Any last words, Craig?
Yeah, I would just say that I've had the pleasure of mentoring for Hacking for Oceans for a couple of years now, and the ideas that are being generated out of that program are ideas that are investable, and I think it's incredible. And I just want to thank you, Steve, as well for having me here today, and also for contributing towards the ecosystem that's being built around ocean sustainability.